Hello. I'm glad you joined us again for our study of Solomon. The topic is Solomon, Wisdom, Wealth, and Women. Today we'll look at some verses in Proverbs and we'll cover basically 30 wise sayings, and that's in Proverbs 22 through 24. So if you have a Bible with you, go ahead and turn to Proverbs 22. We'll be starting in verse 17. A little recap. In previous lessons, we've talked about the life of Solomon. If you remember, he was king of Israel. He was the third king of Israel. He reigned for 40 years. God asked him what he would like, and he requested wisdom so that he could rule his nation. God was very pleased with that. So God gave him not only wisdom, but wealth also. And so we see that Proverbs in the Bible is a collection of wise sayings. None of them are too long. And what we have in chapter 22 is 30 sayings, 30 collections of the wise. The key thing to remember here is this is wisdom that Solomon has collected over a period of time. Some are original to Solomon. A lot of the sayings are collections that Solomon has made over his lifetime. So let's go ahead and get started. We're in Proverbs 22, verse 17. Pay attention and turn your ear to the sayings of the wise. Apply your heart to what I teach, for it is pleasing when you keep them in your heart and have all of them ready on your lips. So that your trust may be in the Lord, I teach you today, even you. Have I not written 30 sayings for you, sayings of counsel and knowledge, teaching you to be honest and speak the truth, so that you will bring back truthful reports to those you serve? Do not exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the needy in court, for the Lord will take up their case and will exact life for life. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. Do not be one who shakes hands in pledge or puts up security for debts. If you lack the means to pay, your very bed will be snatched from under you. Do not move an ancient boundary stone set up by your ancestors. Do you see someone skilled in their work? They will serve before kings. They will not serve before officials of low rank. Let's stop there and review a couple of these sayings. So the first saying is pay attention. Turn your ears to the saying of the wise. So as we've discussed in previous lessons, there has to be a desire for knowledge, a desire for wisdom. It's the desire for wisdom is probably the best desire anyone can ever have. He follows that up with talking about the poor and exploiting the poor. And if you do that, that's not going to be a good thing. The Lord will take up their case. He will plead for them. He will take their case. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person, and do not associate with one easily angered. So again, the relationships we have, the people that we choose to be around are very important. And this saying is avoid people who are hot-tempered and easily angered, because they will, in general, get you in trouble. Now, he also talks about, do you see someone skilled in their work? They will serve before kings. They will not serve before officials of low rank. Now, a lot of times, when I talk to, I teach at the university, and so I see a lot of young people. And what they're doing at the university is developing their skill set. Now, what is said here is someone who is skilled in their work will serve before kings. So what that implies is if you're if you have a skill and you're very good at something, you will get responsibility for doing that work, and you will rise in your occupation. So again, spotting people that are skillful and asking them to help you is a valuable thing. And that's what kings look for. Let's continue our verses. We're in chapter 23 now, verse 1. When you sit to dine with a ruler, note well what is before you, and put a knife to your throat if you are given to gluttony. Do not crave his delicacies, for that food is deceptive. Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Do not eat the food of a begrudging host. Do not crave his delicacies, for he is the kind of person who is always thinking about the cost. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. You will vomit up the little you have eaten and will have wasted your compliments. Do not speak to fools, for they will scorn your prudent words. Do not move an ancient boundary stone or encroach on the fields of the fatherless, for their defender is strong. He will take up their case against you. Apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. My son, if your heart is wise, then my heart will be glad indeed. My inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak what is right. Do not let your heart envy sinners, but always be zealous for the fear of the Lord. There is surely a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. Listen, my son, and be wise, and set your heart on the right path. Do not join those who drink too much or gorge themselves on meat, for drunkards and gluttons become poor, and drowsiness clothes them in rags. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Buy the truth and do not sell it, wisdom, instruction, and insight as well. The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. May your father and mother rejoice. May she who gave you birth be joyful. My son, give your heart and let your eyes delight in my ways. For an adulterous woman is a deep pit, and a wayward wife is a narrow well. Like a bandit she lies in wait and multiplies the unfaithful among men. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has strife? Who has complaints? Who has needless bruises? Who has bloodshot eyes? Those who linger over wine, who go to sample bowls of mixed wine. Do not gaze at wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly. In the end, it bites like a snake and poisons like a viper. Your eyes will see strange sights, and your mind will imagine confusing things. You will be like one sleeping on the high seas, lying on top of the rigging. They hit me, you will say, but I am not hurt. They beat me, but I don't feel it. When will I wake up so I can find another drink? Let's stop there. So this last series is basically on over drinking, and the advice there is this is going to lead you on a really bad path, and physically you're going to become numb to many things. And we know that this was a problem in Solomon's time. It's still a problem with us today. We have not only alcohol, we have other kinds of drugs and other things that we can partake of. But the saying here is be careful. And he talks about eating with people and who don't really enjoy your company. Don't do that. Don't speak to fools because they won't listen to you. Apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge. These are the things that we are to do, that we're to listen and not only listen for our own well-being, but as we mentioned last week, those we're around, we're we need to be around people who are wise also. If we're around people who are unwise, that will lead us to unwise decisions. In this series also, it talks about parents and parents disciplining their children. It also talks about parents being proud of their children when they are righteous, when they're wise, when they're knowledgeable. And he encourages his children, again, to search for wisdom, instruction, and insight. We've talked about this quite a bit. If you remember at the beginning of Proverbs, the writer started with the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom. And that's the theme really of Proverbs, that the fear of the Lord and respecting the Lord and acknowledging that all good things and all things in nature come from God is the beginning of knowledge. Let's continue. So, we're now in chapter 24. So, here's saying 20. This is the 20th saying. Do not envy the wicked, do not desire their company. For their hearts plot violence, and their lips talk about making trouble. By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasure. The wise prevail through great power, and those who have knowledge muster their strength. Surely you need guidance to wage war, and victory is won through many advisers. Wisdom is too high for fools. In the assembly at the gate they must not open their mouths. Whoever plots evil will be known as a schemer. The schemes of folly are sin, and people detest a mocker. If you falter in a time of trouble, how small is your strength? Rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those staggering towards slaughter. If you say, but we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Let's stop there. So again, the couple of these sayings are repetitive, and there's a lot in Proverbs that there's repetition, but that's a good thing. One of the things that he talks about in verse 5, chapter 24, is the wise prevail through great power, and those who have knowledge muster their strength. Surely you need guidance to wage war, and victory is won through many advisers. I want to stop here for a minute and talk about getting advice. Victory is won through many advisors. We talked about in previous lessons about knowledge and how you gain knowledge, and we're lucky these days in that the written word is transferred in many different ways, not just orally and through the written word, but we have electronic transmission, which really lowers the cost of transmitting information. But again, you have to search out for it, and you have to consider the source. I've always encouraged people when they ask me questions or tell me about new information or new ideas. I ask them where they got this idea or where they got this information, and then they give me the source, or they might not know the source. But it's always good to know the source of the information, because not everyone is giving you accurate information. And that's why you get many advisors. You accumulate information and knowledge from different sources, and you evaluate those different sources based on the knowledge that you presently have. Now, we're studying Proverbs. So we're studying a book in the Bible. So the Bible is a great source of information, wisdom, and understanding. But a cursory reading of the Bible might lead us to an understanding that is limited. And we see that Paul talks about this when he talks about young Christians. He says they're still they're still drinking milk from a bottle. And he encourages us to be mature Christians. And one of the ways to do that is to be around other Christians, mature Christians. Also to read your Bible, to pray and ask God for direction and guidance, which is kind of what we're doing here. The more I read the Bible, the more mysterious, and sometimes I understand it less, but I still search for meaning. Now, we're going to see in Ecclesiastes, when Solomon talks about, and near the end of his life, a lot of the things that he said in Proverbs, he's going to not recant them, but he's going to have a different perspective on them. But let's continue with our 30 sayings. Saying 26. This is chapter 24, verse 13 in Proverbs. Eat honey, my son, for it is good. Honey from the comb is sweet to your taste. Know also that wisdom is like honey for you. If you find it, there is future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. Do not lurk like a thief near the house of the righteous. Do not plunder their dwelling place. For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. But the wicked stumble when calamity strikes. Do not gloat when your enemy falls. When they stumble, do not let your heart rejoice. Or the Lord will see and disapprove, and turn his wrath away from them. Do not fret because of evildoers, or be envious of the wicked. For the evildoer has no future hope, and the lamp of the wicked will be snuffed out. Fear the Lord and the king, my son, and do not join with rebellious officials, for those two will send sudden destruction on them, and who knows what calamities they can bring. So we end these 30 sayings with kind of where Proverbs started. Fear the Lord, but he adds something new here, and he says, fear the Lord and the king, my son. Remember, Solomon is writing this from perspective of a king. And he says, and do not join with rebellious officials. This is assuming that the king is a good king, that the son, there are rebellious officials, which Solomon had rebellious officials, so he was familiar with that. But he knows if you join the rebels, there's going to be a lot of calamity and destruction. So be careful. Now, one of the things, one of the verses here that I especially want to concentrate on is verse 17 in chapter 24. Do not gloat when your enemy falls. When they stumble, do not let your heart rejoice, or the Lord will see and disapprove and turn his wrath away from them. Do not gloat when your enemy falls. We live in a culture that's very competitive. We live in a culture where there's a lot of winning and losing. And the American culture, we definitely value winning to a great deal. And we acknowledge winners probably more than they should be acknowledged. But again, the key here is the competition. And the advice here is if you do win, don't gloat over your enemy. And when they stumble, don't let your heart rejoice. In this competition, respect your competitor. Many of you have been involved with athletic contests over the course of your life. You've been lucky to engage in that, which is really a valuable thing for most of us. We learn a lot about teamwork. We learn a lot about ourselves when we compete. We learn a lot about our competitors and our teammates. And athletics is a good thing, but it can be, it can go awry. And again, we see this a lot in professional sports where celebrations are a little out of, get a lot out of control. And the saying here is, be humble. If you win the game, that's good. Rejoice in that victory. But don't gloat over your enemy. And when your enemy stumbles, don't rejoice in that. In fact, the most inspiring stories we see, and you've probably seen some of these, are when in a race, when one of the runners stumbles, and one of the other runners stops and helps them up. You don't see that much, but every once in a while you do. And that's inspiring. It's not inspiring because of who won the race. It's because it implies a character trait on that person who helped the other runner. And that's really what Proverbs is all about. It's about character. And this brings us to what wisdom is and what knowledge is for. Now, we've talked about this in previous lessons about knowledge, and the knowledge base we have today is much greater than it was in Solomon's time, and we're very fortunate for that. I wouldn't be sitting here teaching this lesson over a television camera. There's a lot that goes on in transmitting this content, this lesson to you today. Most of us don't understand the physics of it, the electricity or the electrical engineering of it, but we enjoy the benefit of it, the result of it. It's the same with wisdom, in that a lot of times decisions we make, we enjoy, or we might enjoy, or we incur the consequences of those decisions, but at the time we don't see what that will be. It happens later. And that's what the writer of Proverbs is trying to convey to us. There are consequences to our behavior. There are consequences to our decisions. There are consequences to our communal decisions, the decisions we make. He's going to later tell us about some decisions we make. For instance, when we choose a mate. That's probably one of the most important decisions that anyone will make, is who they choose to align themselves for much of their life. And he's going to have some advice about that. We'll cover that in the next lesson. But to be humble and follow the Lord is one of the things that is we're repeatedly told that in the Bible. Now, the ultimate lesson that we need to study, again, is in the New Testament. The ultimate wise person on this earth was Jesus. Now, Solomon came before Jesus, and he didn't have what we have. He didn't have the teaching of Jesus and the New Testament. He didn't have the life of Jesus that we know about and what happened, the resurrection. So we're very fortunate. But the wise sayings of Solomon and those sayings that he collected are still appropriate today. And each day we're going to face decisions. We're going to face decisions that are going to have consequences not only for us, but for those around us. Solomon's perspective is one of a king. Most of us are not kings. We might think we are, but we're not. We're servants. And even if you're a king, you're a servant, really. If you remember the Bob Dylan song, you're going to serve somebody. Who are you going to serve? Well, we know that most of us who've chosen to be Christians, we're going to serve God and we're going to serve Jesus. And we're lucky to be able to do that. Again, thank you for joining us as we continue to study Proverbs and the sayings of Solomon. I hope you'll join us in our next lesson when we'll finish up Proverbs and go from there to Ecclesiastes. Thank you very much. Hope you have a good day.